Hey everybody, and welcome back. I got asked a question recently that I wanted to answer for everyone. And the question was, why do we resume compressions immediately after we defibrillate someone? We don't check for a rhythm or anything, right? Now this is excluding where you initially, cardiovert VTAC and witness the rest. I'm talking about where, cycle after cycle, we shock and we go straight to compressions, or whether it's first responder using an AED where they don't interpret the rhythm, they still shock and go straight back to compressions. And I wanted to answer this on a grand scale because I do get asked this question a lot because I'm one of those nuts and bolts people. So the real reason is because cardiac tissue has automaticity. If you think back to cardiology, even when you were going through the beginning stages of whatever course you went through, they told you that a cardiac cell can depolarize whenever it wants to. The trick is you have to give the heart all the raw materials that it needs, and it will try to do what's best for it, right? So I'm not talking about a picture-perfect environment. I'm talking about the heart getting enough blood, enough oxygen, or whatever it may be for it to resume operations, okay? So think back to PVCs. The heart's not getting what it wants, usually an oxygen deprivation, and you're looking at a decent rhythm, and then bam, you see a PVC happen. And what causes a PVC? A PVC is caused by a single myocardial cell that's not getting what it wants. Or it could be a group, right? If you want to go back to the vocabulary, the ectopic foci or the ectopic focus. So we tend to think of those as bad, and I'm not saying they're great. However, they are an indication that there is at least enough raw material going to the heart so that it can perform that operation, right? So that it can make a PVC happen in order to reperfuse itself. And a couple of PVCs in a row are a pretty nice thing to have, if someone's in a systole and you manage to get that rhythm out of it, right? So we're sort of beggars aren't choosers when it comes to that realm of things. So getting back to the topic, we have to give the heart everything it needs. But one of the problems with ischemic hearts is they like to go into crazy rhythms, right? They like to go into ventricular fibrillation. So those ectopic foci that are doing their own thing in 30 or 40 different places in the heart is contracting in one spot, it's relaxing in another, and vice versa. It's trying to contract in 3 or 4 different spots because everywhere's trying to throw a PVC at the same time, right? It's like having an angry mob, rush the grocery store, rush the banks during the Depression. So defibrillation is the way to put all that stuff in line. And what we're trying to do is send the heart back to its normal resting state. And there's really only one way to do that, right? That is to depolarize every single cell in the heart. So that's the reason we run that electricity through. We want to depolarize every single cell, everything that can be depolarized. Think back to your relative refractory period, right? You got to have a strong enough stimulus, but you can do it. And when you do this, the entirety of the heart, it loops around with some calcium and some sodium, and then bam, the potassium all goes back into the cells, hopefully at the same time. That's the goal of defibrillation. Then, now that you've got a completely negative heart, right, it's negative 67 millivolts is where myocytes like to stay when the potassium is right. You go ahead and circulate that now oxygenated blood that has been, loaded up with some oxygen in the lungs during CPR, right, while you were giving either your 2 breaths or doing asynchronous CPR with the advanced airway. So now that you've depolarized everything, you're going to run some new supplies in, and hopefully the heart will know what to do with them, right, if it's not too badly damaged. So if the conduction system and stuff is not too badly damaged, and the muscle itself is not so badly damaged that it can't constrict, that's all the heart needs, is for you to give it the raw materials, and it can take it from there. The resting state, that's where it wants to be. You need to think about this like a computer, right? As long as your circuit board is intact, you've got a little power in the battery, and there's nothing broken on the inside, when you mash the power button to your computer, it knows exactly what to do to start up. You don't have to sit there and load every individual program like those of us who are old enough to remember back in the day, the floppy disk and the DOS and stuff like that. So your heart's like a computer in that respect. As long as it's got everything it needs and you mash that button, it knows what to do to start up, and then you can influence its behavior from there by running a program or whatever. Cardiac tissues are almost identical to it in that way. If you can get it restarted, if you give it everything it needs and everything is intact, the cardiac tissue will restart, and then you can influence it from there, right? If it's not contracting hard enough, you can add dopamine or Levophed or epinephrine to the bloodstream and make that happen. If it's not contracting fast enough, you can apply more electricity or atropine. You can run certain programs within the heart. But the only way you can get there is to depolarize every single cell at one time and then do a couple of hundred compressions to flood in that, it's not new blood, but that newly oxygenated blood. And then once the heart has everything it needs, as long as all the equipment is still in good condition, it will restart. And that's the reason we go straight back to compressions after defibrillation. Alright guys, thanks for watching.